So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I hope that each of you has had a chance to read. Hi, Janet. Good to see you here, Janet Koplos. Each of you should have had a chance to read the colorful and interesting bio that Jill provided us with. I thought it was great. I said, I don't want to change one word. And so I'm going to just start with a few questions that I have actually given Jill ahead of time, so she'll be ready and prepared to answer, and then we'll open it up for questions that you might have of her. And it's great to see that we have people from Australia and the UK. I'm glad to see that because I know that it means that you're up late at night in the UK and you're up early in the morning in Australia. So kudos to you for doing that. Now, is everyone familiar with Studio Potter to begin with and its history? Hi, Mary Jane.
Mary Jane.
I haven't
seen Mary Jane forever.
Haven't you?
No, that's crazy.
She lives a half hour from me, so I get to see her often. It's my treat. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the history of Studio Potter and how kind of the vision that Jerry Williams had and how today's Studio Potter fits into that vision.
Well, when you ask that, I feel, earlier, well, last year, not earlier this year, it feels like one big year, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did a chat, Jess and I did a chat with Mary Berenger and asked her to do this, what you just asked me to do. And she commented on how it was, like a second generation, like it's definitely the story is carried forward. And so I feel like I'm, well, gosh, what am I, 5 people removed from the origin of this story? So I hope that I get it all right there. But the idea was born in 1971 in New Hampshire, and the first issue was published in 1972. And it really was, a networking, a way for people to, there was information, right, that was shared, and it was a way for, Mary put it as, everybody was having the spirit that the Potters are going to go out and save the world and go to the woods and be self-sufficient, and right, and there was information exchanged in the pages of Studio Potter, like how do you build a kiln, right, and plans, things like that were shared through it. It was the social media network at its time, and Jerry would travel around and showcase regional groups like all over the country, Indianapolis or Indiana Potters, the New Hampshire Potters, Maine Potters, wherever he would go, and he would travel around the world and try to make everything accessible. Mary Berenger was the second editor, and she worked with Jerry for 2 years before she was completely handed the reins. And it's funny, if you ever get to have a conversation with Mary about that, it's a good conversation to have. Just the different styles in editing, because Jerry would just let anybody's voice go wherever they wanted to go, and he didn't really weigh in at all. And Mary felt more of a obligation to help maintain people's voices, but to really help elevate their voices in a way. And so Mary was the editor for 20 years, and I think that is really right between the end of Jerry's tenure and Mary, the time that she was there, is that the Studio Potter print edition that we all everybody mourns now that it's digital, because everything was organized under themes. Mary had these great openers, the letters from the editor that gave a great arc to the themes, introduced the theme, right? And the themes are something that people miss now too, I know, but they were just leaping off points, you know. Like I'm thinking about the money issue is one that's on my mind a lot right now because of the stories that are coming up for February, but it was just a beginning point, and wherever people wanted to run with it, like a prompt in a writing class, you know, it can go a million places. And then when Mary, she is an editor emerita now, I believe is her status, but Eleanor Wilson came on board in 2014. And it was really, Eleanor oversaw the journal through its time when like memberships were waning and the financial reality of carrying this on. And I know when I learned the cost of printing the journal, it's tens of thousands of dollars in distribution and printing, creating, you know, one edition of it. And so with memberships on the decline, that just wasn't sustainable anymore. And I believe that the board, I mean, Elaine, you were there, or some of you who are here now were here for these conversations on the board, and it was not an easy decision to decide to go fully digital. But along that way, in that trajectory, when Mary was the editor, she oversaw the Arizona State University, the ceramic, I'm not going to, because I'm on the spot, I'm not going to get the name right. Elaine, can you help me? The Ceramics Research Center at Arizona State,
Yes.
right? They house the collection, and Mary helped make that possible. That happened in 2009, so that archive is there. But there also are two, there's an editor's edition that I have here at my house that's like the whole collection. So there are, like everything is digitized now on our website, and people can search, and that's something that we've really been promoting through the past year and a half, that you can still search the archives. But the physical copies, a set does live at the Ceramic Research Center, and a set does live here with me. I'm not archival, but I'm taking darn good care of it. I sort of was like, are you sure you can keep it? And so that was 2009. And then in 2016 is when the push to get everything digitized so that it was on our website happened. And in 2019 was when, I mean, it was really like Studio Potter is going to stop existing. And that question was really on the table, or Studio Potter is going to carry on as a digital journal. And the board decided that the majority decided that they wanted to carry on and have it be, yeah, accessible that way. And so that's what we've been doing. But throughout, I think that Studio Potter, it's always been about the voices of our community. You know, it's never been the place where even though it started off and there were stories about how do you build a kiln and there were plans in there, it's not, that is not the bulk of what Studio Potter has been about, because that's what the community was talking about. That's what the community wanted to converse about in 1972, and not that they don't anymore, but what we've seen in 2020 is that there are conversations about what are we going to do about systemic racism now, right? And those are the conversations that are a lot of people in our community are talking about, and they're still talking about wood firing, right? But these other issues are coming about, and I think that's something that Studio Potter has always been able to do, or that's what, yeah.
I just want to interject here that Anna Kaluri Holcomb just posted in the chat that she understood that Jerry Williams stored his copies under his bed.
Well, I feel better.
This is from a reliable source. I think it was Jay Lakator, who, you know, of course, worked with them very closely. So, yeah.
So then how do you see today's Studio Potter fitting into that continuum?
You know, David Macbeth is a current board member, and he sent me, I think it was at the end of last January. So that was 1 month that I had been in this role. And he sent me a quote from Jerry that was about basically increasing circles, overlapping circles. And that has been a theme of in my own life. Like I didn't know that Jerry said that or that Jerry felt that way, but I think that's something. So I guess I'm saying that, Elaine, because I feel very much in step with that spirit of Studio Potter, that it's like, how do we continue to increase the circles, find ways that the circles overlap within our community so that there are more and more people. That's in any position that I have had in the ceramic field, whether it was running a gallery or overseeing artist grants, it's always been like, look to the periphery of the circle that I'm in, who's outside of it, and then what circle are they in, and who's on the edge of their circle, and to continue going out in that manner. And I think that Jerry had that spirit, and I think that's a really useful attitude to have. You know, right now it's serving us very, very well. So I
Yeah.
think that's something, but it's really about the people, like the ceramics, the objects, the processes, the materials, the technology are all a conduit to the humans that are doing it. And for me, that's what I've always loved. When I was a student reading Studio Potter, it was because I could really hear the people, you know, and then the narratives were there, and there was room for people to wax on, right? Like the word limit was almost limitless, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do a true confession here that, but I applied for the job that Jill has, and she was selected, and I am so glad that she was selected because she is doing such an amazing job. And I was actually relieved not to get it, but I'm just so glad that she's doing it. And
well, if I knew that, I would have said there's no way they're giving it. Yeah.
And then I wanted to mention, kind of in the line of what you're talking about, in the January issue, there's an article by a potter, a sculptor potter of color. And instead of Jill asking her to write about her work, she asked her to write about what it's like to be a woman of color in the ceramics field. And it's a real eye-opener. It's a real learning experience for all of us to go and look at that article.
Do you mean Danielle Kerlock's article?
Yeah.
Oh, so, well, can I actually, that's not 100% right. What I asked, because Danielle has weighed in on a few, maybe two. There are two stories in 2020 that Danielle was like a satellite to. So the article that interviewed Melissa Weiss when she collaboratively created a letter for potters to send to organizations to inquire about systemic racism. Danielle Kerlock was the one person of color who said, I'm happy to help you write this letter, because Melissa didn't want to draft the letter. She wanted it to be many voices inside of it. So Danielle was a part of that. And we had so many stories that were about the protests and like trying to figure out how are we going to right our ship, and Danielle was always so great to work with. And she has her own studio that she's running, and she has a sliding scale system that she offers people so that they can come and take classes based on what their income levels are. And she's just this amazing person. And so I was like, why don't Danielle, I invited her to actually write about her practice.
Oh,
and I was like, let's just hear from you, and like about the work you make, about your journey. And when she sent me the first draft, and because of how, I have the freedom, I guess it's a blessing and a curse of Studio Potter, is like, she did not give me the story I wanted at all. But as she says, she can't talk about that right now because these other things are weighing on her mind. And I guess that I said, okay, that's the story we're going to tell then.
Good.
And yeah, that's how that happened.
And it's a real eye opener, I think, her reading her article. So if you get a chance, please do that. Um, so you talked about these circles, you know, the inner circle and working out. And I can see how you are doing that in the seeking of writers for the monthly articles. But how do you find them, and what criteria are you using to solicit and accept articles?
Well, I'm always surprised. I think nobody's going to submit a pitch, you know, that I'm just going to have to, and then they they come in out of the blue. And I mean, I'm open to anybody's story, you know, and I'll admit to you, in the past year, I've learned some things like that has gotten me into a pickle a couple of times where I'm like, I thought things were going to be one way, or that a voice was going to come across in a certain direction. And before it gets published, I was like, whoo, whoo, that is okay. Should have asked more questions. But
Yeah.
but it's so I am trying to put it out there that I'm open to whatever comes towards the desk, as it were. But also I will spend, even though it got to be super hard to spend much time on Instagram, if you go in with the intention of searching specific hashtags and seeing what people are talking about and who they're pointing to, and you just go farther and farther and farther. Then I have a woman in Turkey who she mines wild clay in Turkey, and that, you know, she's going to be writing for us in 2021, and that'll be an adventure because her English is, you know, way better than my Arabic, but it's not. We're going to have to work it out to get to a ground that everybody can understand, and we've agreed to go through that process together. But that's one way, Elaine, that I do. And then I'm trying to think about all of the people that are reading. I'm trying to think about the people that have been reading Studio Potter since 1972, and the people who I feel like I'm constantly concerned about, am I talking about pots enough? Are we looking at what people are making enough? But I also think that sometimes, here's going to be my controversial thing, is like, I think that in medium specific areas that we can build, I mean, maybe, all right, my voice is arguing with me in my head. Dogma can be a problem for us, right? And so there have been times when somebody like Matt Mitros, who wrote an article about his cups, where he uses, you know, toys from his children's, or the Steph Leonard's article where she's like partnering with Woodfire Potters to put plastic beads on top of it. Like, I don't think that that's better than a beautifully crafted stoneware utilitarian plate, but I don't think that it's worse either. I think that they're like, those people are interesting because they're opening up questions, and who knows where they're going to land. And so I want to have those stories in there too, but then I get nervous within my own head that like, oh, I got to get something that's like closer to like the tradition, so people don't think, oh, why did they give Jill this job? She's just going to spin out and all we're going to have are plastic pots. Because I think it's exciting that we're in this place in time. I mean, in so many things where we have the luxury of the timeline of history to, I call it, do you guys remember, anybody here remember Garanimals? You like, right, pick and choose. That's how I like think about it. Like, we can put a pink hippo with an orange tiger and go forward. And if you want to only have orange tigers, then you can just have orange tigers. So I want to show that with Studio Potter, that it's, yeah. And I'm so far off of the original question, Elaine, but
That's okay. That's okay.
yeah.
I had Janet Koplos posted a question about the demographic. What's the current demographic of Studio Potter, of the members?
Oh, okay. So I'm going to try not to lie in making up. So one of the things that's changed with us being digital is up until me, the editor and the director was the same thing, right? And now Jessica Detweiler is the director and I am the editor. And Jess monitors the analytics that come through on the site. So I can tell you that we get the traffic that we get on our website is in the tens of thousands of hits on it. Now, a hit doesn't necessarily mean people are hanging out for 2 hours on the site, right? But there is a younger demographic that's on the rise for like the 20-year-olds that are coming into what we're seeing. But we also do have a pretty good swath of like the traditional what you would expect. Like look at who's here right now, and that is there. But I know that most of our traffic is coming through to the website from social media, from Instagram is like clicking through to us. It's not coming from the newsletter that gets sent out every month. And I'm going to tell you that Jess and I had this interesting moment when she's always watching the analytics and seeing where we're getting things so we can figure out how to talk to people. And I emailed her and I said, I should be looking at that. I should see like what stories are getting a hit and where we should be going so that we can drive up our membership. And she sent me the access to look at this information. And it was immediately clear that this was a mistake, that I should not look at this. I am a very intuitive person. That is like how I operate, and it has served me well so far, and it's taken me a long time to trust that. And looking at that was poor. I mean, I looked at it for all of 5 minutes and I can't look at that. So I don't have a better answer for you on demographics than that. I listened to the board members, to the membership committee. Ashwini Bhatt is on the social media committee with me, and Jess. Those people, if they're telling me that we're getting, the audience is still coming, and they tell me to keep going in the direction I'm going, then I do. And that's how I am tracking it.
Yeah. Okay. And
It
if
just
any,
froze me.
what?
It just froze me when I
Oh.
saw, I thought, oh, this is going to make up my mind about what I should be. And
Yeah. And there is a educator package which was just introduced in the past year, and that allows the educator to have their students have access and gives them access to that. Anna's nodding her head, so she's probably a subscriber to that program within it. So the educator numbers are we hope increasing, but
yes,
it's a wonderful resource for educators, for anyone who's teaching ceramics out there.
yeah, we did have like, it was like 350 schools when we gave that away. And so we also just got a grant from, I have the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft stuck in my head, and but the Craft Research Center, that's what it is. We got a $5,000 grant so that we could make those available again for free, to be able to pay for some other membership packages. So a 2 to 3 year dream is that we wouldn't have to have a paywall at all, that we would figure out a way to support the journal digitally, that our membership would say, this is a valuable resource, this is an important chronicle that's happening, and we want everybody to be able to read it. But something that we have been doing is we make one article per month free, but eventually we'd like for them all to be free so everyone could read it.
Okay, I'm going to ask Jessica is here, the executive director of Studio Potter.
Oh, good.
And Joe Loria has asked to post a link to the educator's package. So I'm going to ask Jess if she could do that in the chat. That way anyone who's interested might be able to just take a link right there. Would you be able to do that, Jess? I'm not even waiting for an answer. I'm just saying, good. Thank you, Jess. And then just in the past few years, Studio Potter has been able to pay authors. It is just $100 per article, but how do you see this as affecting the ability to solicit articles, if at all?
Well, I think it's, you know, anytime you can compensate people even a bit, it's called an honorarium, right? So that it's calling it an honorarium is an acknowledgement of the fact that it is not a large sum, but that it is something, right? And we appreciate people taking the time to share their stories and go through the editing process. And we have had people who refuse the honorarium. So that has been, it's a way for them to donate, and it's pretty generous. So then it means we can potentially in the future, like maybe we could pay somebody else. But I'm thinking of like Bonnie there, or Bonnie, and well, so many of you, but Bonnie has written for us, and Bonnie writes books for a live, right? And so I thought it was really generous for you to write a story for us for that honorarium, you know, and there are moments where I'm like, you know, and but everybody has been really wonderful about it. So I think that it is a step in the right direction for sure, you know, and it gives us something to offer people, especially if you're I don't know, I just think it's a good acknowledgement to about the time that it takes, because they don't just, you know, all of you are writers, and you know how it's like, what is that, oft misquoted and misconstrued, but like nobody likes to write, everybody likes to have written. That thing. So but I don't know, Elaine, that it has like changed the quality of it necessarily, because it's not right. It's not like we can. Yeah, I don't think it's so much that that suddenly we're pulling in Pulitzer Prize winning authors to write, and Jerry Saltz hasn't come knocking at our door, but that's okay. I mean, yeah.
So this is the Mary Beringer
Writers Fund.
Writers Fund, in case anyone is interested in contributing to that. I'm just saying, you know.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. And I just want to add some discussion, I guess, or hear you talk about what you think the role of ceramics publications is today, and more specifically, what's the role of Studio Potter. And when I say that, I want to acknowledge that we have a tendency, we're a material specific publication. And so we're preaching to the choir a little bit. We're not necessarily increasing our audience to the patron, or what do you see as the role of our ceramics publications today? And it might be different for each of you who are here, who are editors and publishers. But anyway, let's discuss the role of where Studio Potter and what other ceramics magazines in general, the role that they play.
You want me to go first?
I
Kick
want
it
you
off?
to go
okay.
And then we'll open it up
to
comments and other questions.
I think that, right, every one of them, yeah, just everyone, Ceramics Monthly, Ceramics Art and Perception, Ireland, New Ceramics, they're all, I think they all are have very different objectives, you know, but for Studio Potter, I really think it's the voice of people, the real, I think it's like for me, it's always why I wanted to be a part of it, was because it was like the most human voice. It was getting into the heart of the why of why everybody does it. And I don't think, I always, when I ran a gallery, and with this too, I always try to think like, would my mom want to read this? Could my mom read this? Because she, you know, she's not into ceramics, and would she be interested in the story? And in that way, a little bit by little bit, that's always in the back of my head, but I don't think I'm going to be bringing 5,000 people to our little world to buy pots and keep us going with that attitude. But I guess a chronicle, it's important to chronicle. We look back and see who are these people, because I think that I really believe, even on the days, there were so many days in 2020 when I was like, oh boy, we should all just like stop, and we need to go, and yeah, all of us need to be studying to be EMTs, or we need to go back to law school, or there's right something else. But in my core belief, though, I really believe that being an artist is a political act. I believe that it is an investment in being able to make something from nothing, and that if we can, and if we're teachers, then we can pass that critical skill set on, and people can like change the world because they believe that they can like take a lump of clay and create something useful out of it. So I think that carrying that torch forward, telling these stories is a big part of that, and it's like a touchstone for me.
Mhm.
That's like, yeah.
I think that's interesting because today I just watched a TED talk it was a TED student talk by Amanda Gorman, in which she talks about having been asked by someone to write a poem for a specific purpose, but don't be political. And she said, poetry and any form of art is political. It has a statement to make. I'd like to open it up for questions from the floor.
I had a question. My background is in architectural ceramics, even though I'm also working in ceramics for my own love and pleasure and passion. And I also try, since I'm in New York, to see as many shows that involve clay as possible. And there's more and more, as you're all aware, clay in fine arts galleries that's changing the relationship of the material clay to fine art. It is not somehow including potters very much, as far as I can tell. It's mostly sculptors and artists working in other ways. And I just wonder how people feel about this, what the response is to clay suddenly bursting onto the scene. Gagosian is showing rooms full of clay right now. You know, it's sort of amazing. And Sterling Ruby's got his big, huge ceramic things on the cover of interior design magazines. It's quite something, and I just wonder how other people respond to this.
Can I know I've been running my mouth, but can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
Because you know, when people, I'm thinking when I was working at Red Lodge Clay Center, that people would say, oh, are you a potter? And I say, no. And they think the instant response is like that I'm saying it's bad to be a potter, but I'm not. I'm saying it's a very specific skill set that people have worked really hard to do. And it is not, you do not want, like, maybe you could drink out of my cup, but I'm not gonna be able to make 100 of them for you. And it might not be the most comfortable one. It might make you laugh, but, you know, might also spill coffee on you. So I think that the thing that stuck with me with what your question there is that, like, I think that potters are, it's a different role. Like, I don't know that they like belong in Gagosian, or that there's anything wrong with that. I think like they could just be potters who we can be proud of, like what potters do and where potters are, and that like those sorts of crafts, I don't, I'm not saying that they're not as valuable. I'm just saying it's different. Does that make sense? And
Well, a
I
lot
think
of
it's
people
okay.
who are working in clay are not potters.
Mhm.
They're clay artists working in clay, maybe commissions, wall work, sculpture. Um, and so they are not, they're in the limbo. They're not fine artists, so-called, because the establishment won't accept it, and they're not potters. So there's a vast number of people who are working in clay who are in you might say in limbo in terms of the art and craft worlds.
I think that the breadth of the application of ceramic material today within the art world is so great. There's a broad expanse, from what Mark Sakula does industrially with production to performance and installation, etc. I think that um, there are people in the world, such as Edmund Duval, who have taken, who have created the installation of functional pots, and
Right.
Julia Galloway does that. It gives an entire different span or expanse of venues in which to show work, and so it's such a broad field right now. And when I was working on my thesis, I subscribed to Art Forum, and I found that in every issue that I received, there was one article on ceramics. Now, granted, most of them were sculpture or other applications, but there was one on functional pottery from South America, which I thought was great. It was functional, but also a little bit of ritual. So it was richly written about. And my contention with my thesis was that there is good writing. I analyzed 48 articles in fine arts and 48 in ceramics, and the quality really didn't vary. But the quantity did. I had to go back to, in some cases, 2009 to find enough reviews of ceramic work. But every issue that I received of Art Forum had 45 reviews in it. And so multiply that by 12 in the number of magazines that go out in a year, and it's the quantity of our writing. If we lose our material specific publications, we lose all that audience for whether the collectors or patrons of ceramics are exposing themselves through these publications. It's still important that these magazines continue and are there, and I urge everyone to support them in whatever way you can. I mean, that's just my little spiel. Sorry about that. Diane Charnoff had a question. Diane.
And hi, and thank you. This is wonderful as always, Elaine.
Thank
Jill,
you.
my question would be, in going digital with the magazine, I'm wondering if there's any adaptation of the format, so that in addition to writing, there would be film, oral delivery of words, interviews with artists that could be heard to expand audience or meet the moment of how people are connecting with, everything that's going on in the world, even beyond print. And I say this as a writer who loves words and and holding them, but awareness of changing life.
Yeah, I think that Diana, I've been like tiptoeing up to that, and with because, well, let's see, what was it? Wasn't January? It was December? Was it? Or no, it was November. There was an interview with Sunshine Cobb, and in January there was an interview with Josh Collinson, who started the ceramic school and runs the ceramic congress. And when I say interview, it was a video that was on our YouTube channel. And I also posted it on the website, like in it, but the video interviews were satellite supports to written articles, right? So it was like provided a more in-depth access to the conversation. And then we've also, social media, we have a committee that works on social media, and that you treat that as a leg of storytelling. And then our membership committee has also been giving us content for social media, but trying to use that as a storytelling device, although it's been a heck of a year to figure out how to navigate that and to do it sensitively. But yes, I think that shifting that format and figuring out how do we move to video, or like, do we have audio, or it would be great. Adam Field actually told me about, I have it on my phone now, but that, you can put an automated reader on, so it can it'll read the page for you. It's not very pretty and it goes along like this, but you can still be working in your studio and read the article with it. So I know in the next couple of years, the website is going to get an overhaul. And so we are talking about those things and figuring out how we can, but I think it was so painful to make the decision to leave the hard copy behind. It is hard I don't think we'll ever leave the words behind because, yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions for Jill or topics of discussion? I see that Wendy Gers put something in here that I'm going to disagree with. Hi, Wendy. She said, I think a lot of potters are just not conceptual or eloquent enough to be embraced by the contemporary art scene. I think that regardless of their analytical bent, every pot, and I don't mean this literally, but has content and can be written about in just as critical a manner as any sculpture or performance or installation. It is inherently full of content.
But do
And
you think Wendy's saying that maybe the pot is, but the potter is not?
Exactly. I think, can I respond? I think it's just so much more difficult to be original and innovative when you make functional stuff, because there's a limit to function and keeping something functional, as Jill said. Otherwise, you've got coffee everywhere, and there's just so much scope for innovative work and for originality when you're not. When you haven't got function, that the need to make functional work, and I think a lot of people just kind of fall in love with material, fall in love with technology, and I'm sorry to be very critical, and fall in love with that, and sort of just take the foot off the pedal of critical engagement. And it is difficult to have your energies in many fields, but then I sort of hear that a lot of people saying, like, why are we left behind? And there is a lack of critical writing skills, and I think this is what this group is about, and it's so great to have this group to really focus on professional development and critical writing skills, and then the importance of discourse within this field where there often is discourse lacking.
And I think that I mean, when I was editing Ceramics, Art and Perception, I didn't go to the artist or the potter for his or her own writing. Often the artist did not know that there was an article coming out, because I was looking for the writing to be objective, which is different than what Studio Potter is about. But I was looking for more critical writing. And in that case, how the potter views his or her work is irrelevant. It's what is out there in the work and how the critic or the writer sees that work. But one of the first things I was told was we're tired of artists writing, of friends writing about friends. They wanted something that was more objective, regardless of whether it was a functional pot or any other genre within the medium.
I don't think that potters have to necessarily also think they have to prostrate themselves at the altar of contemporary art, you know, because everybody can't be at the same spot on Mount Everest, you know, and on the way up, you know, you got to still come down from that high peak, you know. So when you're talking about contemporary art, you're talking about another economy, you know, and you're also talking about people who are buying that art who are actually pretty ignorant, you know. So don't feel that if it's studio potter, there's two different words there. There's studio and there's potter. And there's something that happens in the studio, then there's the outcome of what happens in the studio. And there's a lot of space to discuss that. And as we've mentioned before, history. And I do think that it's unfortunate, potters do have to compete with corporations who are in bed with a lot of contemporary art dealers, you know, who are bringing stuff out of the factory and just oversaturating the market. So people are really irritated that a potter is selling their cup for $60. That's a failure on the part of the end of the consumer, not being able to recognize, as you said earlier, Elaine, the story in that pot, you know, the labor, you know, and the skill set and the tradition that's been passed down. So I wouldn't necessarily say we have to do everything to please, you know, kind of a lot of that could be elitist ideas in contemporary art. Not all of them. You know, I remember when I saw at Art Basel, or is that how you say it? I always think I'm saying it wrong. Drake was performing. You know, that's popular culture now entering something that's supposed to be the elitist critical thinking. And we have, you know, if you think about Drake and the atmosphere or the attitude the music brings about, it's more chill. It's about something else. You know, it's not about considering Clement Greenberg's writing as we look at the contemporary painters coming on the scene. So contemporary art ain't always putting it down. And never forget that they're always searching people who haven't hit it yet to transform that and take it and capitalize on it before that individual does. So sometimes we have to think about where they get their stuff from. And they don't always give credit from someone they've talked to or encountered. Everybody is not on the up and up all the time. So just because it glitters and shimmers does not mean it's gold. I just wanted to say my little piece. All right, I'm gonna mute now.
Don't leave.
And I'm not saying Drake is bad. I'm not saying Art Basel is bad. I'm just saying contemporary culture came in there with what's supposed to be high art. So I just think that's something to think about too.
Yeah.
I will dance to Drake, just to put it out there. You've never seen me listening to it. I'm not being a hypocrite.
We have a couple of comments that I want to get to. Malcolm Smith said, we just need to work hard at learning how to tack into the layers, baggage, and reference and consequence there is in any and every utilitarian object. Bonnie Kemsky, who is a former editor at Ceramic Review in London, said, at Ceramic Review, I aimed away from the potter sitting at the kitchen table talking about their work, but there is still something special about people's stories. And I agree. I totally agree with that, Bonnie. One other, Joe Loria has a question that she would like to ask. Joe?
Oh, hi. I just wanted to know if I know you don't consider, or you do consider analytics, but it's not your driving force in what you decide to put in Studio Potter on a monthly basis. However, I have noticed, to me, what I would consider a frightening trend, which is that stories about artists in general that have to do with working with clay that are historically based don't seem to be given very much play in current publications, whether they be printed or digital. And I'm and I'm thinking that maybe this is because with Instagram and Facebook and other platforms that the younger people, I don't, I can't say I've ever been on TikTok, everything is so current that yesterday to them is history. And I noticed this with our students when I teach at Otis, because some of them don't even know what 9/11 was, and because they were born that year. So I'm just wondering if there's some reason that publications seem to be shying away from doing articles which are historically based. Or maybe my perception is incorrect.
Well, for Studio Potter, I would say that I'm not intentionally shying away from it. That there are a couple of stories that I've been trying to land with people that haven't landed yet for personal reasons that the authors have, that they're dealing with stuff in their lives that hasn't happened yet. But then there was like, Margaret Bowles, she wrote an article for us in 2020, and it was about her research that very much went into like the history of pots. So it was like this crossover, like how does history impact now? And I'm thinking even the article that Chotsani wrote a few months ago, that was about gardening, like it wasn't the history of pots, but it certainly went into history, and how the history of trading posts impacts what she makes, so it does, going deep is in there, a lot of back and forth. Anyway, and those are the two that come to mind from 2020 immediately, Joe. And there are, I can tell you from my part, I'm trying, like I'm thinking of that there's like history, technology, materiality. So I'm like looking for those. And when I do go searching around for stories, like I'm looking for those and asking people all the time, and asking our board members if they know somebody who knows somebody. And so it's not on my part, it's not for lack of trying. And I'm confident that there will be more that'll come if I continue to look for it.
Right. Well, it was
Because
more of
I
a
agree
question.
with you.
Yeah, it was more a question too about your readership. That
Mm.
readers tend to drive a lot of content today because everybody is searching for, numbers, because you have to substantiate your, or validify your existence. And I don't think that readers are so much interested right now in anything that isn't, current, whatever that means. And I think it's like a pendulum, it'll shift back, but to me, it seems like there's much less interest in things which happened in the past than there is with things that happen currently.
I don't know. I mean, I do want to hear what other people think, but I'm instantly thinking about the cartoons that Richard Nickel and Diane, that reminds me of like when you're thinking about other ways that we're redefining, right? Is that having Richard Nickel do cartoons for us quarterly is another visual way that we're looking at storytelling. But to the history part, Joe, he, like every cartoon that Richard did for us was diving into history, and he did invite younger people to do it. So I think that they are interested in it, but I'm not saying it always has to be a cartoon to get them the spoonful of sugar to make the medicine of history go down. But I do think that there might be something in like, how is history presented? And can we make it like point out to them how, them being those young kids, that history is relevant to what they're doing. And I think we have to be better storytellers to help them see why it's important, but I think they'll read it. Yeah, sorry.
Studio Potter has published a fair number of articles that have to do with history. I've written some, and I think it's an important point. And as long as you're out there scouting for history articles, that's great. You'll find them, I'm sure.
Yeah. I also think that it enriches writing about contemporary work to have a link to lineage, and to show where that work came from, and history can be brought in that way, so that it relates and also educates.
Well, it provides context.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that so many things that I've been reading about contemporary art in general lack the context
Yeah.
Mhm.
of where they came from.
Mhm.
So I would like to see, and I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I mean, because it's much harder to write about context than it is to write about contemporary,
Yeah.
because all the information is there, easily read, accessible if you're writing about contemporary, whereas context is much more of a deep dive.
Mhm.
So, I
Yeah.
think I'd like to read more articles. And I see it a lot in costume history. I look to writers who, when they're talking about costume history, of course, they have to talk about context, because you don't understand clothing unless you understand cultural issues of the day, of the era. So I read them and think, how can I, interject my writing with that kind of wide sweeping context? Because a lot of times as writers, we assume that readers know more than they do, or
Mhm.
we just assume they understand the context, and sometimes we have to lay that groundwork.
I also think that using ceramics in performance or installation, the historic lineage should be linked to those genre in other media, so that we aren't myopic and only look to our own material. I think it only enriches the ceramics field. We're getting really close to the hour, and I have a couple things I want to do here first, but Wendy made another comment. The difference between pottery and the craft scene or in fine art scene is not qualitative or quantitative. It is simply speculative and economic. Um, and then Leslie Farron posted another journal that's formerly historic, but more recently including contemporary material and definitely contemporary work. So that link is in the chat if you're interested. And Malcolm is saying we might parse and focus on the types and varieties of audience we're speaking to in our journals. When we address each other, our project should be to make clear and not confuse, How can we generate dialogues that are not just echo chambers, but create tendrils that grab new readerships of consumers and would-be collectors? I think that's a valid question, and that's what we're looking for, is broader audiences, better writing, etc. And Bonnie has an uncomfortable question about readers. Do you want to ask that really quickly, Bonnie? And then I want to make just a couple of announcements.
Sure, sure. It's actually aimed at Jill. One of the things that we did at Ceramic Review was we asked our readership how many of them actually read the articles. We found it was really, really small. Have you asked that question? What have you found? That's part of the reason why we had so many pull quotes, and I kept pushing them to have big captions, because people read the captions in the pull quotes, and I wanted them to at least take something from the article.
Yes, yeah, and I've used pull quotes a lot this year, Bonnie, but the at the beginning of 2020, I created a survey to find out what stories people wanted to read, what they were looking for, and but I didn't ask yet how many. I haven't yet asked how many of them are reading them. I suspect, though, I think that's one reason why when I saw like how long people, even though they come on the site, how long they stay, because we work really hard on the stories. I mean, every person who publishes, right? You put a lot into it, and you're like, oh, they're gonna love this one, and you don't want to know.
Part of the reason it has to be beautiful as well, isn't it? Because you got to keep them somehow.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the 2021 survey. We'll find out.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions for you. One is, first, it's a statement. Linda Lighton has given a generous donation to us to help to keep this going. And I'd be interested in any of you who have an idea of who you would like to hear from to email me, and I can see if we can get them. I think that her donation could keep us going for about 6 to 8 months if we are careful and get some people in here who can give us this kind of lively conversation and attendance. The other thing is that if you are a writer, I know there are a few of you who have already told me, given me your names. If you are a writer who would be willing and interested in mentoring emerging writers, please email me. If you are a writer who would like to be mentored and have your work looked at by writers here, please email me. Okay. I had hoped that Sebastian Blackie would be here today, but I don't think he is. Are you, Sebastian? I haven't seen him. Because Bonnie put me in touch with Sebastian, whom I've known for years, but he recently retired and is wanting, we had hoped to do it this year, but because of COVID-19, he was unable to. And he would like to do writers' workshops for people interested in writing in ceramics. And I thought that that could be a good marriage for Critical Connections and Sebastian. And one of his suggestions, just for our editors, that Diane Charnoff and I have had some emails back and forth about the pros and cons, would be to have editors, and Diane had a great suggestion because of the sensitivity of saying, oops, your article was terrible, would you like a mentor? We don't want to go there, but if editors had on their submission form or their contract a checkbox that said, I would be willing to have, I would like to have a mentor. I would like to have my work looked at by someone beyond the editor. It might be someone, and if they say no, then that's fine. But if they say yes, then we could be there to help you. Vicki, I see a grimace, a Vicki grimace. No, because I think, do we go out to people who are emerging writers and say, do you want help? I don't think that's very comfortable for any of us. But I would love to be able to get some emerging writers out of the woodwork. I have one name on my list right now.
Elaine, I don't know if you've ever applied for a writing grant through the Warhol Foundation.
No.
Okay, well, I did. Well, I didn't get the grant, but part of what they ask as your application is progressing, would you like to be considered in the pool for mentorship with a writer? And I, of course, said yes, because I don't see any reason not to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the language in the way they present it in their grant, which might be helpful to look at.
Yes.
Because the way it was presented was, you're asking us to consider your proposal for a grant.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you don't get the grant, do you want to be considered as part of a mentorship program?
That's great. Do you have that wording?
No, but I'm sure I could go to the Warhol Foundation and I mean, I don't know if you actually have to apply to get that, to get that response or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't get the grant and I didn't get the mentorship either. So screw them, but no. But I have to say that I've had meetings with other cohorts in craft institutions, and they've all said that they have applied to the Warhol Foundation, and none of them has ever gotten a grant to do either research or an exhibition that came from their craft organizations.
Yes, fine arts, that's them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said that the cohort should get together and shame them, just outright shame them and say, we have all applied. You have not given us any consideration, but yet you say you are DEI, diverse, equitous, and inclusive, yet you are making these hierarchical decisions not to give grants to craft organizations.
Mm-hmm.
On that point, Creative Capital would have the language, and I've done a lot of programs with them. And for the Warhol Foundation, the issue of community and how one is spreading it and how that grant is written. I mean, everyone here is very, well regarded. So I'm not here to teach anyone, but I think we can get that language, or I can look it up for you, Elaine, as well.
Okay, that's great. That would be wonderful. And then I could send that out to editors if you are willing to do that. I think it could be a real help, because my goal here is to, as I said, improve and increase the writing in ceramics, improve what we're already doing and increase it as we can. So I'm really open to anything. And as I said, if you are interested in mentoring a writer, email me. And if you are interested in being mentored, please email me. So I will be looking for someone for next month to to enlighten us again. And I really appreciate all of you coming. It's always just a joy to see you, this great group of people. Any final thoughts? Okay, I'll be in touch.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Elaine, for inviting me to do this. And yeah, thanks, everybody.
bet.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Jill. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.